Welcome to another Civ 6 Guides, Tips, and Tricks video. This time we're going to be looking at Better Balanced Game version 3.6, how it affects the game, as well as the September update to Gathering Storm. After that, we're going to be looking at how this affects my ranking of all the civs in the game. So it's going to be quite a long video. So we're going to start with the Better Balanced Game updates. So I have a list of them right here. I'll go over them sort of quickly with a little bit of analysis. So American film studios going to 50% tourism instead of 100%. This is still not enough. I think this is still a super powerful benefit. Basically, once you hit this, you're going to win the game. You only really need 2 tourism percent modifiers to have an unbeatable amount of tourism. So this sort of enables them to get this much earlier than other civs, since you hit environmentalism far before you hit computers. And this is sort of very close to computers, but it does give pretty decent bonus to America, since I believe any civ is pretty good at culture victory at the moment. Egyptian sphinxes can no longer be built next to each other. This does cut a lot of the power out of Egypt that I originally believed they had. You can only probably get about 3 sphinxes on a river, and while they're good, this is not enough to usually get you a super good monumentality, and it doesn't get you a really strong amount of culture. It still gets you a pretty good amount of culture, but it's nothing to think that you want to pick them purely because of the sphinx. They still have many other benefits that make them very consistent, but the sphinx is very neutered from this change. There's a lot of Persian changes. I'll just sort of go through quickly what is important and what's not. The Paridesa changes are not important at all. You're not building around the Paridesa like on other civs with their unique improvements. So getting 1 culture when you're next to a campus, maybe if you're lucky, you're getting like 2 culture. Paridesa 1 culture, 1 gold when you're next to an industrial zone. You want other stuff like districts next to industrial zones or mines to make them good. You're not looking for that 1 gold when you build your industrial zone. Or 1 gold when you're next to a harbor. Same kind of principle. You're not looking for that when you're building a harbor. You're probably looking for it to be like near other districts to get adjacencies on the coast, maybe with your campus. Now that reefs give +2 adjacency to the campus, that's one of the Firaxis changes. But this one's a little bit more reasonable because harbors do go next to your city centers most of the time, and the city center is another adjacency for the Paridesa, so this can work out. This is probably the most reasonable of them, but they're all minimal. Persian internal trade routes, they get 2 culture at medieval fairs, 4 culture at urbanization, 2 gold at banking, 4 at economics. Economics is a super late game tech, as well as urbanization is a civic. So these 2 bonuses really don't matter that much. The ones that matter are banking, 2 gold, which is kind of doesn't really matter. There's like a merchant for a very similar bonus, and pretty much no one wants him. And then there's internal trade routes get +2 culture at medieval fairs. This one can help, especially if you're trying to grow smaller cities or just get high amounts of production and get really big cities with internals. But you're probably better with externals at this point anyway. You can make alliances that give these same yields or better. So these are all sort of not that great. The last one that's important is that Persian units gain +3 combat strength when attacking. So this one is actually useful because it's a combat bonus, and it works really well with their immortals that usually ranged attack a lot of the time. So they don't need that bonus on sort of your player phase when you're getting attacked, or enemy phase, I'd say. So this is good. Scotland, originally I'd said they're kind of weak, but I think before this change, I think I would have probably put them as an average civ. But with this change, I think they're one of the best civs in the game. Happy bonus is increased from 5% to 10%, and ecstatic is 10% to 15%. Basically, percent bonuses when they're really strong. When they get even buffed a little bit, they become way stronger. Just because when you're multiplying your science and production, and it's huge. On top of this is basically modifiers to your science and your production, and then you have the golf course improvement, which modifies your culture and your gold. So every single aspect of this game is enhanced when you play Scotland, as well as you get a lot of amenities. You get extra great people points for your scientists and engineers, which are very important people to get, and you also get you're ecstatic in most of your cities since your improvement gives you an amenity, which enhances these even further. The final one is the Scotland Highlander, gives 10 defense strength. This just makes them insanely annoying to deal with, especially if they get the plus 20 combat strength promotion. I don't understand this change at all. It just makes them like modern armor basically on defense before you get even to steel. So it's like insane. If you get high science and you're able to get to rifling really quick, you can just roll over people with this unit because they'll never be able to kill it. They'll just feed you promotions by the time you get down to 50 health, and then you go back to 100. Magnus's surplus logistics promotion now gives you 2 extra production, so now it's 2 food and 2 production. This is great. It's also a nice pathway. If you go Ancestral Hall, you get the no settlers don't lose your production, or population, excuse me, promotion, and then you can go for this. As you transition, put down a bunch of commercials, get your cities really high production and food. You get some really nice cities with this. Cliffs of Dover can be sold on, nice quality of life change. Communism Collectivism card now gives 2 production to domestics. It makes it on par basically with democracy, which is really nice. Goddess of Fire Pantheon Faith from Volcanic Soil and Geothermals went from +2 to +4. This makes this niche pantheon actually viable. If you get an early volcanic explosion and you've got like 6 tiles to work that are really nice and they're all volcanic soil, and you've settled maybe on like a few geothermals, now you have a really nice monumentality. So I think this is definitely worth it, but it's very niche. There are only certain situations where you can actually use this, but when those situations arise, it's actually a very good choice. Domries are returning as a catapult replacement. That's good. They're terrible in their base game position. And 5 offense and defense is basically a normal thing to have on a unique unit. So this is good. Baths are getting culture per adjacent district back, and it's only a minor adjacency, so you need 2 districts next to each other to get a +1 culture boost. But it's really nice. Roman baths are good, and this just makes it a little bit better. Rome doesn't need a buff, but it's kind of like one of those things that got added. It was initially just a normal adjacency, but it got changed a little bit. It got removed, and then people really liked the flavor it added, so they added it back as a minor thing. Warrior monks, I don't even want to look at warrior monks, they're just awful. And then Francis Tourism from Wonders bonus is cut in half. This is just purely due to a cheese strategy where you build every single classical and ancient wonder on France, and then use that tourism to get you an early culture victory. It can be easily countered, but I don't know. People just didn't like it, so it's now gone. It's impossible to do. So that's the better balanced game changes for version 3.6, which is probably one of the last versions to have any kind of major changes. Most of the ones from now are going to be bug fixes and changes if something is severely overpowered. But now we're going to just look at a lot of what's happened with Firaxis' changes. So they gave Maori a pretty decent buff. I've seen a lot of people play around with it. Additional +1 production from mercantilism and +2 from conservation. It used to be +1 production at conservation, Now you're basically just having you get an extra one at conservation, but you also have like a mid-tier civics and mercantilism that gives you +1 production, and that's kind of like getting to industrialization almost on Maori, and then this is like going beyond. So because at conservation you can build woods everywhere, and you get 2 production from them on top of your 1 production bonus, so it's a 3. So, and then you can also get the Murray bonus. So you can start to see where this gets kind of crazy. But it's really nice to help them have a really strong late game. Especially because this civ is so random as to whether you get a good spawn or not. It's kind of nice to be able to have a more reliable late game, let's just say. Georgia, this is just a kind of minor buff. They get 50% production towards defensive buildings. I think this is more in line to make it so the base game sicky walls were able to be built easier. But because the mod changes this to be a ancient wall, it makes it so you can basically 1 or 2 turn the wall. You could definitely 1 turn it in like new cities with the 100% cart. But even without it, you can probably 2 turn it without the card. So this really helps Georgia get those walls online really quick. But I don't think it's anything too major that makes you pick Georgia if you weren't already going to pick Georgia. The Great People, I'm going to tell you which admirals are useful. Themistocles is the best classical one because he gives you a 20% production boost towards your naval range promotion class. So if you're going to be building ships in the future, he's the guy to get because he saves you a lot of time. And basically, you're going to be getting like free ships out of him, essentially. On the 3 medieval, all 3 medieval admirals are really good. The best I'd say is probably Leif Erikson. He gives you 1 sight range. Being able to see further than your opponent is absolutely massive. You can just plan attacks so much better with the extra information you get. You're not sort of just playing a guessing game with Leif Erikson. Regenta Chola is also very good because you get +3 combat strength for all your naval units, and so like combat strength is hard to argue with, but both of these are a very similar caliber. Zheng He is just good if you're going harbors, but you're not really looking at going for sort of a military side to it. He gets you the free trader and trader out capacity, which is really strong. There's a merchant that does a similar thing to him, and that merchant's super contested. So this admiral will also be pretty contested as well. You're probably going to see projects run for all 3 of these if you play naval. The rest of these are pretty awful, or they just come too late. And what I say by awful is that they're not as strong as the medieval or the classical ones. Like getting a free privateer and pillage rewards, it's not that great. A luxury and 300 gold on standard speed, which means 150 on online speed, it's not that great. 500 gold on standard speed, which is 250 on online, and more like pillage rewards on trade routes. Like you're rarely going to get to use that. Flanking bonus on naval units is kind of like nice, but it comes way too late. You're using battleships at this point and getting a free lighthouse and a shipyard in the district. If you have a new harbor, like out of like a brand new city, sure, but by this point you should probably have a lighthouse and a shipyard in all your main cities. So he's pretty meh. This guy comes, I've never seen this guy because he comes too late. I've never seen this person because he comes too late. So those are all the Great People. Improvements, buildings, and wonders. Mausoleum, I'd say it's a mid-tier wonder. Gives you a science of faith and a culture on all coast tiles, and you get an additional charge on great engineers. Basically, if you're playing Indonesia, I'd say this is a really good wonder because you can put kampungs everywhere, and then your coast tiles are really good as well. But you really need a lot of resources to make use of this being effective, because this boost here I think is the main draw to why you want to pick Mausoleum. The Great Engineers is a nice side effect, especially if you can get Wonder Engineers, because you'll basically pay back Mausoleum's cost in this bonus, in the Great Engineer bonus. So um, there's definitely situations for it, but it's pretty niche in my opinion. Not usually worth doing it if you only have like 3 or 4 tiles to buff. Um, Lighthouse, this is a huge buff because it gives you 2 housing if the harbor is adjacent to the city center, which means that you get 3 total housing on coastal cities with a harbor. Um, you're definitely going to want to build these out quickly. It also helps out naval civs because getting to 10 pop used to be kind of a struggle with housing. Now it's not really. You can definitely get to 10 pop and probably even further because of how the lighthouse also gives you extra food on your resources. Fisheries give you 0.5 housing. Only reason I would ever say doing fisheries is if you have a mausoleum city and you just have a ton of culture, and for some reason you're deciding, let me go Liang and get those fisheries, and yeah, I guess you could. And then you could have a pretty decent city with them, and it could be super huge, and you could work all the mausoleum tiles. But it's very niche. But this is nice. I mean, the fishery was an awful improvement, and now it's like pretty decent. The shipyard gives you 1 production to all unimproved coastal tiles. Again, mausoleum city. Seems like everything builds into that, but it's pretty good. The shipyard is already like a super strong building, so I mean, like you would build the shipyard regardless of this bonus. So this is just nice. The camp gives you 2 gold instead of 1, and then who cares about when synthetic materials giving you additional gold? No one. This just is nice. The camp was a terrible improvement before, and now it's a pretty decent improvement. It's kind of like a plantation that doesn't give you food, because now, guess what? Plantations give you food at feudalism. So plantations are definitely like a top tier improvement that you want to focus on early. So getting irrigation and getting all your plantations online before feudalism, very good investment. You get your gold and then you get your growth. Fishing boats at colonialism, they give an additional production. This goes on top of the better balance game buffs to it, so it'll give that additional production on top of the base ability of 1 food and 1 production. So fishing boats are pretty good late game. You're going to see a very strong tile that has a lot of food and a decent chunk of production, so it's worth it. Campuses get a major adjacency for reefs, so definitely going to want to build your campuses now adjacent to reefs, combo them with a harbor and a city center, and you've got a nice +3 campus. The other thing that I want to talk about, none of the rest of this stuff is that important. The other part is that production overflow has been patched out. So now you can no longer save production for multiple turns. You can save production for 1 turn, but then it's deleted upon the next turn. So this really hurts science victory, because that's sort of it was the main strategy for doing science victory before, and you could get it pretty quickly, but now it's not possible, so it takes quite a bit longer to do science victory now. And now you actually, culture victory, in my opinion, is the strongest victory condition because it does not rely on this production overflow bug, and it was buffed because of the production overflow bug being so useful in science victory. So now it's sort of overtuned, let's just say. Okay, so that's another bug that they don't actually talk about, I think, in here, is that they changed it so if you upgrade a unit while it's under the effects of a card or a government, a policy card or a government, it does not, that bonus does not persist. So if you upgrade underneath oligarchy, your unit is no longer permanently affected by oligarchy. The only thing that persists through upgrade is the Great General bonus. So the Great General bug is still around, but it's only with the Great General. It's not with any other aspects. So let's go to my tier list. This is my updated tier list as to where I put people. So I'm just going to talk briefly about why different civs are changed around and some like key civs to look out for. So the top three are America, Japan, and Scotland. Scotland's your premier science civ. They have a lot of culture generation, which is really useful now to getting to like democracy or some third tier government for going for space. They have a lot of gold generation. They basically have everything. So it's kind of hard to beat really good at everything. They're just an amazing civ. Nothing much to talk about there. Japan is super versatile. They get half cost districts on 3 of their districts, so they can camp the holy site in the theater. So if you want to play like a religious based Japan, you're really strong. If you want to play a culture based Japan, you're really strong. Science based Japan, really strong. Every kind of Japan build you can think of, you can play, and it just goes perfectly together because of how the district adjacencies work for them. And then America, they're super safe. They have the film studios, which ensure them culture victory in the late game. And they also have like the Rough Rider, which is a really nice and cheap unique unit. And they also have their +5 combat strength and their P150 fighters, all giving them some kind of defensive like ability. And no one's going to attack America for the most part, so you have that sort of aspect of deflecting a lot of aggression or being the aggressor yourself. You get to choose. Very strong civs. I put Rome, Russia, Australia, Inca, both the Greases, and then England. Rome, you can pretty much control the early game. You get a lot of snowball potential off your monuments. Your legions are amazing. All the infrastructure of Rome, just super good. Russia is a really strong culture victory civ, and they're also very isolated. You can get a lot of faith generation, couple that with a theater square, and you can start unlocking their great person generation. You could faith purchase a lot of the key great people, like the bank merchant, wonder engineers, or just like science boosts, like scientists or the holy site scientist. They can all be under your control. Australia really benefits from the changes to the sea. Inca is just always super strong because they get great spawns. They have improvements to make their cities really good early and scale later. And then the tunnels really allow them a lot of mobility around the map. Both the Greases are really good culture victory civs. They set up really nicely. And then, of course, England's up here because England just keeps getting buffed every time, and they're always going to cement a really strong role. They have good admiral production, and now that admirals are really strong, England gets even stronger. Some key strong civs that I changed up since my last tier list. I put Congo and Germany up here. Congo because culture victory is really easy with them. You just need to get like one wonder, and you can probably have enough space in their capital alone to stack all your musicians and art that you'll ever need, and just get enough tourism to a point where it's impossible to stop. Germany can do a very similar thing with culture victory Germany is very flexible as well because they get an extra district slot. So if you need to get that extra culture, you can use that extra district slot as a theater square. You could use it as a campus. You're going to set up Hanzas and commercials, obviously, but you're probably going to... But with that high production in Germany cities and quick setup time, you're probably going to be able to do pretty much anything. I kind of rated them too low before. I moved Sweden up a little bit, just because of the culture victory meta that I believe is happening, but I don't think they're super great because even though they have tourism bonuses, they're still very susceptible until they get their special pike and shot. And even then, it can still be kind of scary. They don't have any like science boost or great person generation or theater square coming faster. And a lot of times getting early books can really help cement a culture lead that can then lead into just getting what you need, the key civics quicker. Any bonus you get early is much better than bonuses late. And Sweden is sort of a late game powerhouse. Other civs that I moved up was Khmer and Mali, because I kind of thought that the Mali nerfs were going to be way harder. They're not as bad. I think Mali is still not a great civ. It's not the powerhouse it used to be, but it's still a really good gold generator. And then Khmer, Faith is always useful. It's just sometimes Khmer can get fucked if there's no rivers, so that can be kind of difficult. If they get like a coastal game, they're kind of over. But Holy Site games have never been sort of my my forte, but I think they can definitely work with what they've got. They've now that the Domri's back in position, it's a little bit of a better civ to play. Other civs I moved up. I moved up Persia to sort of a weak civ because of the +3 bonus. I think that makes them at least a viable civ you could play, but not very good. Ottomans I moved down to very weak because now that you cannot abuse double oligarchy, it's a little bit harder to make use of their janissaries. I moved down Hungary because Hungary, I don't know, people have never been able to use Hungary's units effectively. And when the main game type is Diplo Plus in free-for-alls, you're only getting +2 combat strength on your hussars, so it's pretty meh. I also moved down Gandhi because I've never seen Gandhi do well ever. He has like nothing to him that's useful. But yeah, that's basically going to be my tier list and my balance change thoughts. So if you'd like to see something like this again, leave a comment, subscribe, leave a like. I like doing this kind of video, talking about my thoughts on the meta, where civs are placed, sort of trying to figure out what's best and how to abuse it the most. And thank you for watching. Have a good day. Hope to see you on another one of my videos. Bye.